Jellyfish is Tracy, and I'm in like a super good mood today. I'm like really excited. I'm really happy. So what do I do when I get excited? I like to film YouTube videos. That's kind of what I like to do. So I had this idea for this video because I was thinking back to when I played Elves in Modern, and I remember how I basically how I built my Modern decks is I would look at a ton of deck lists and I would see what I liked from there, and then I would, take those cards, I always add a little spice in there, add a little juice in there. Like I know for my elf build, at the time that I was playing it, it was kind of a little bit before Shaman of the Pack, I think, was introduced. I know a couple of elf builds ran white in the sideboard, white in the sideboard. Okay, I was like sidebar. I was like, what? That doesn't make any sense. White in the sideboard, and that whole thing. But I started playing it when Shaman of the Pack was introduced, and I was playing it at that time, which was a ton of fun. And something that I did that I noticed in my deck, I specifically remember this one example, and I don't know why I thought of it, and I was like, I need to film a video about this. As I was looking through a lot of deck lists, I saw this one land that a lot of the deck lists ran. Yeah, a lot of the deck lists had. Oh, I don't know, no, I know what it is I didn't run 3 Azuri in my build. I only ran 1, and I honestly couldn't tell you those extra spots, like about why I ran only 1 and not 3. Like 3 is the average number. And I couldn't tell you what the other 2 spot holders were. Like I can't think about what it was. So I was doing something a little bit different with that. But I remember in those builds, I saw this land that was, I believe it's Okina, Temple of the Grandfathers or something like that. And basically what it is it's a green land. You can add green to your pool, and then you can tap it, and target legendary gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So I saw that in a lot of builds, and then I went and like, at the time, the card was like $12. It may even still be that price, I don't know. I bought the card, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, why am I running this card? I'm just looking at it, and I'm like, this card doesn't make any sense in my build. And I think what basically happened with me is, at that time, I was so set on taking a list and feeling as though that list was the only right way to build this Modern deck, and if I change anything, especially mana bases are so sensitive, they're so important. Ooh, that's a good word, I like it, they're sensitive. Because if you tip off your mana base a little bit, if you change something up, one of the reasons why I think a lot of people think that net decks are so great is because everything's kind of done for you already. You don't have to go through the trouble of figuring out your mana base. You're going to a tournament and you need to build the deck, and your friends and you decide like suddenly, oh hey, by the way, tomorrow we're going to a tournament, and you're like, I need a deck. Are you really gonna sit there and be like, let's think of something really spicy to do? Or are you just gonna copy someone's deck online? Most people do like to net deck because they think that those decks are established, those decks are good, so of course I'd want to play something like that. And, like a lot of people in my elf build thought that I was crazy to not run 3 Azuri. Like, people gave me so much flack for it. They were like, your deck list is bad, your deck list is wrong. And like I said, I feel like I'm remembering the deck as having more shamans than, I think I ran 4. Honestly, that card is nuts, by the way. If you don't know what that card does, it's a 3/2 for 3 mana, 1 colorless, 1 green, 1 black, and when it enters the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to the amount of elves you control. So you like Coco into Shaman. The best was Coco into Shaman twice. Fam, that was lit. Those were the days of doing that. That was sweet. So fun. Oh my gosh, people are like, elves are bad. No. Coco Shaman elves were the best. That was like a great time period in my life when I played that deck. It was sweet. So basically, I had this whole like sort of mentality where I didn't really understand why this card was useful in there. So when I transferred the net deck over to my deck, I ran that land because I felt like it was important. So if you're someone who's net decking, if you're someone who's changing things up, if you're someone who's looking at a deck list, keep this in mind. Look at every single card, and I'm not just talking about like spells, I'm talking about lands too. I'm talking about everything. Look at every single card and ask yourself, why am I running this card? Why am I running this many of a card? Because a lot of people always say, with numbers, for example, like let's just talk about elves because we're already talking about that deck. You're running the difference between 4 or 3 shamans. Some people look at that and say there's only 1 card of a difference. Listen, You have 60 cards in your deck, 15 in your sideboard. Every single spot matters. Every single spot. So if you're wasting, you can waste a spot. You can waste a slot on this deck. And that's why I always think if you're playing with a deck, even if you're net decking it, test the deck out. Because you know what? There is not one way of thinking. There is not one right answer in Magic. You can do, in a sense, whatever you want to do. People will call you out. They've called me out plenty of times, think that my decisions are wrong. I've said, I want to play with this card. I think this card is really good. People will tell me if there's something better, you should be playing this instead. In which case I reply, actually, I want to do that thing because it seems really sweet. So I'm going to go and do that thing. I'm such a rebel child, man. Gosh, I am. So, yeah, I think that's a really important thing, is I think some people kind of blindly look at a deck and just assume that everything in there is great. Like, I totally blindly assumed that this Temple of the Grandfathers card or whatever was, like, amazing. And I was like, well, I guess I need that card, without even thinking about it, without even realizing why the card was in my deck, especially because I changed the deck. I wasn't running 3 Azure, even so, I don't even think that card is that good, in my opinion. I mean, maybe it was just because I didn't play with, that build. I didn't play with the build that ran 3 Azures, like I was only playing with 1. So yeah, that's a really important thing. And yeah, and I think seeing with your deck, like, I think a lot of people, especially if you're trying something out, say like you're trying out, I don't know, only running, we'll just keep going with the elf example, like you're only running 3 Shaman of the Packs, and you're like, hey, what can I cut? What can I try to do without? Break the molds, don't be afraid to try something else out, even if people think that you're wrong or that you shouldn't do it. I think it is really important for experimentations, because then we had a stale format, and that's boring. And I think a lot of reason why a lot of like wizards and stuff, and a lot of people who didn't like Twin in the format said that. They were like, well, we don't want to keep the format being stale. And now just, it seems like the Eldrazi are taking over, and like Jund is taking over, and like, that's apparently fun. Jund got all these toys and reprints, but you know what? It's fine. It's fine. Everything's fine, honestly. So, yeah. This was kind of a quick little thing that I just wanted to address, because I think this is important. Evaluate your deck, and you know what? I think too, you can make this applicable to like other things. I think any format. I think anything. Look at each card and say, why am I running this card? What does this card do for me? Does it help me? I think like too, even if like you're drafting or you're going to like a pre-release event, you could look at your deck and that you construct and ask yourself this question. Because you know what? If you can't find an answer, if you can't answer your own question, you shouldn't run that card. If you're looking like okay, unpopular opinion right here, let's just talk about it. I'm gonna get slammed for this one. I can already anticipate. Tarmogoyf's not a good Magic card. It's just not. I don't think it's a good Magic card. I really don't. I've always thought this, and I felt like I've always had this sort of issue whenever I have seen decks that run Tarmogoyf. So a while back, I was thinking about building Abzan. Abzan's like my pet deck, guys. I really like Abzan. I always feel like I talk about it, no one plays it, and I'm bummed because like Siege Rhino, like who doesn't want to play with that Magic card, guys? Come on, it's like the best card. It's amazing. So back a while ago, I was building, I was thinking of building Abzan. There's a couple of different builds of Abzan. I know, I feel like this is such a thing when I'm like, there are different versions of the deck. Like, you know, there was like this thing called Little Kid Abzan, which was pretty sweet if you want to look into it. But it basically, it's just a value deck. I mean, Abzan's just like a value deck. Like, it's a mid-range deck, it's sweet. And, you know, it had a lot of like the similar cards that other Abzan builds run. And I think maybe the main difference between that was mine running Coco? I'm not too sure. Maybe my version of it that I had like constructed, like I was like jotting stuff down on a list. And I think when I was building it, like one of my things was I was like, well, I don't want to buy Tarmogoyfs. This was when Tarmogoyfs were a little bit more expensive. I think now they've probably dropped since Modern Masters 3 came out, but maybe they're like 80 or so now. At the time they were like 150 when I wanted them. And I was like, that's $600 for 4 Magic cards. I am not doing that. That is outrageous. And I didn't want to run that. And again, people gave me flack. They were like, you're running Abzan, and one of the #1 rules in that deck is you should run Tarmogoyf. And I'm like, the card is just kind of meh. It's vanilla, it doesn't do anything. Sometimes it's like a 5-6, sometimes it's like a 7-8. Okay, guys, that's pretty cool. Let's be real here, that's pretty awesome. But, you know what? It's just kind of like a big dude. It doesn't do anything. It's vanilla. And a lot of people will defend Tarmogoyf to the death and be like, Tarmogoyf's like the best card, whatever. Don't like it. Don't like it. Unpopular opinion, I've said it. We have like hundreds of people watching. Quote me on this. Do it. So, yeah, that's like my sort of opinion. But yeah, like, again, a lot of people will just mindlessly run these cards and not know why they're good. Why is Tarmogoyf a good card? Well, the reason why people, the majority of people, not me, think it's a good card is because it's a card that's only 2 mana, but a lot of the time it can be bigger. So you cast Tarmogoyf when you have 5 different things in your graveyard. Hey, look, it's a 2 mana 5/6. Yo, that seems like pretty okay, right? But again, I've given my reasons about why I'm not a huge fan of it. But again, so many people will run that card, like they'll build Jund and they'll be like, well, I just need Tarmogoyfs. And I'm like, why? Do you know why that deck runs Tarmogoyfs? Do you know why you're buying those? And people are just like, well, I just do because the card's really good, and then it's just in the deck. Like, it's an auto, like, inclusion, like, in the deck. Like, why is it that decks, like, you can't stray away from the path? Like, there are cards that are just amazing that it's like you want to run. I don't think Tarmogoyf, in my opinion, is one of those cards. Like, let's take Affinity, for example. You're building Affinity, and you should, you know, cranial plating. Cranial plating is amazing. It's also like it's a little bit different because cranial plating is like 60 cents. But still, cranial plating is really important, right? It's a very important card in the deck because you can, like, if I had infect, if I had infect, lol. If I had Affinity and someone was like, why are you running cranial plating? I'd be like, well, here's why. 1, it synergizes fantastically with, what is that card called? That land that has infect. Not Blightstone Colossus. What? That's not even like remotely in the same pool as that card. What is that card? I'm literally Inkmoth Nexus. There you go. I was like, I'm picturing the art. It's like purple. Okay, Inkmoth Nexus, right? Synergizes really well with Inkmoth Nexus. If you're playing against a combo deck, like Scapeshift, for example. Well, no, I guess not Scapeshift. Melira combo, that's what I meant to say. Melira combo. And that was the deck that I knew, and I couldn't think about it in one of my videos, and I was like, guys, the deck that runs that combo, it was Melira combo. And I remembered after the video, naturally. So, Melira combo. If they combo off, you can still win with infect damage, which is awesome. So, like, it's really good against that deck. Again, infect, you know, it also is flying. Inkmoth Nexus, so really important. Also that card, also cranial plating, it attaches, you know, you're gonna attach it for 1 mana, which is just incredible. You have so many artifacts in the deck that it makes it worth it. You know, you could just go on and on about why that card is really good. Boom, you have an explanation. And not just, well, duh, I'm running cranial plating, the card's just really good. Thinking about, in depth, why is this card in the deck? How does this card synergize with this card, synergize with this card? Because I think, like, that's, like, a major thing, is, like, you want your deck to, like, synergize. So say you have, like, okay, boom, found an example. Anti-synergies drive me mad. I would always build my sideboard, and I was always trying to think about how I wanted, if I insert these cards in my sideboard, it doesn't really try to mess up my plan. Blood Moon is a perfect example of this. A lot of people defend Blood Moon to the death. Okay, I've seen examples of Blood Moon gone sour. I've also seen examples of Blood Moon go amazingly. It's the same with Tarmogoyf. I've seen Tarmogoyf be a 7-8 and it's just wrecked. But I've also seen Tarmogoyf be like, you know, like a 0-1. It's happened before. And then it's just, hey, nice blocker. Nice 0-1. Oh man, I had this train of thought. Oh yeah, Blood Moon. Okay, so people will say that Blood Moon is so good, like whatever. And one thing that really made kind of no sense to me is, let's talk about that in Affinity strategy. Affinity runs Blood Moon in the sideboard, typically, not all, because the Affinity is really interesting because there's so many versions of which color you have in your deck. You know, some do Thoughtseize, some do the card draw one that I can't think of the name of, Thoughtcast. Thoughtcast, that sounds really wrong. It's that 5 mana one, but then it has the thing where if you control the artifacts, it costs 1 mana for, yeah, I think that's Thoughtcast, right? That sounds right. You know, it has the blue, you know, whatever. So a lot of them do run Blood Moon, but what drives me nuts about that card in there is people are like, well, yeah, Blood Moon's really good and shuts down my opponent. And I'm like, okay, but you're shutting down 8 of your lands, all of your Inkmoth Nexuses and all of your Blinkmoth Nexuses. And that makes me, like, that drives, like, that sort of stuff drives me crazy. I hate anti-synergies, and so many people will say, well, you need to. And I'm like, why? Why are you running it? Why? I mean, I understand the point of you're shutting down your board to stop your opponent. And then I always think about this, that one of my friends, Eddie, said, when you're running cards in EDH, I mean, this is applicable to anything, does the card benefit you? Does it hurt your opponent? Does it do both? A card like Rest in Peace, for example, Abzan builds that run Tarmogoyf and Rest in Peace, when I was talking about Tarmogoyf being a 0/1, if you have Tarmogoyf in there, and you have Rest in Peace, and you get off your Rest in Peace, your Tarmogoyf is a 0/1 blocker. It doesn't do anything. So why are you running Rest in Peace? Why aren't you running Relic of Progenitus, for example? There's another thing that gets rid of the graveyard. You can also run like Bajuka Bog too. That's a really good example. Yeah, and I think numbers too, knowing why certain builds run 4 of a card, why some run 3, and what difference that makes, what difference a number that one thing makes. So yeah, I think just not following blindly and understanding and looking at each individual card is very important in deck construction, and not anti-synergy. I can't express enough how I hate anti-synergies. It's like, advance your strategy and try to stop your opponent, but don't try to withhold your strategy. Like, you're withholding your strategy to really hurt your opponent, and it just doesn't make sense to me. I don't know. I mean, I've seen Blood Moon just completely backfire. I was playing against this guy one time, and I don't even remember what I was playing. And he was playing Grixis Control, which, in my opinion, if you're running a 3-color deck, I really don't think you should be running. You shouldn't be running that. Also, because Grixis Control runs, why can't I think of it, that land that becomes the 3/2 unblockable thing, that black-blue land that I can't think of the name of right now, becomes the fairy, not the fairy thing, it's the unblockable thing that Grixis Control typically decks run. He's running that. I don't know why he was running Blood Moon to sideboard. Probably, again, like, some people who run these things blindly, they don't get it, and they're like, well, everyone else is doing it, so I should do it too. Like, herd, is it the herd effect? The herd instinct? Like, we go along more with the crowd? Yeah, real dangerous. I just said that like it was a really bad, real dangerous. They're just magic cards, but like, you know. But yeah, and then he ran Blood Moon, and then he just couldn't do anything. He really could just not do anything. But again, you have those examples of people being like, well, it does great things. And like, okay, combo decks. Let's talk about combo decks for a sec. So a lot of people say that the issue with combo decks is that they don't go off all the time. But when they do, they're very explosive. 100% agree. As someone who's played a combo deck before, absolutely. If you get off, you know, your combo, it's just nuts. But how often does that happen? So a lot of times, like, this is what I have a totally different perspective than most people. When I played Bloom Titan, and I'll keep talking about this, like, the deck was like amazing. Okay, guys, it was you haven't lived until you play that deck before. It was just the best thing ever. So, okay, so like that deck, as someone who played it, I don't really feel like the deck was that consistent. That's the reason why I took it apart, is it didn't feel that consistent to me. And it's one of those games where you lose real hard. It wasn't a close game. You just kind of lose. And people who didn't play the deck would be like, that deck was broken. And I was like, it really wasn't that consistent. It really wasn't. And again, people will like fight me on it and be like, well, you know, like the deck, I was like, okay, I can't give you like statistics. I can't be like 1 out of every X amount of games I would win. Like, it's not like that, but it wasn't, in my opinion, it wasn't consistent enough. But people see those explosive things and they're like, must be good, but it's not good all the time. That's why I took it apart. So yeah, that's it. That's all I got. I'm gonna go, I don't know, do things, relax. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.